요즘 식품업계에서 가장 핫한 키워드 중 하나는 바로 제로슈거입니다. 음료부터 과자, 아이스크림에 술까지 그야말로 제로슈거 열풍입니다. 많은 사람들이 제로음료를 마시며 그것은 살이 찌지 않는다고 믿고 있습니다. 이에 대해 켄베리 박사는 제로슈거 제품에서 설탕 대신 사용되는 인공감미료가 다이어트에 어떤 영향을 미치는지 설명합니다. 그는 20년 경력의 의사이며 300만 구독자를 보유한 유튜브 채널에서 다양한 건강 지식을 제공하고 있습니다.
Reason number one is that many of the sweeteners can lead to fluid retention. And fluid weighs the same thing on the scale as fat. And so many people will be actually burning fat but holding fluid, and the scale doesn't look like it's moving. Now, fluid is technically not fat, but still, we don't want to hold extra fluid if we don't need to. The reason, or the way that the artificial sweeteners do this is by elevating your insulin level. And I'm going to get to that in way number 3 down below. You may not have ever heard of this, but absolutely all the sweeteners raise your insulin. They may not raise your blood sugar. Your insulin's a whole nother thing, and all the sweeteners raise that. Number 2, using artificial or sugar-free sweeteners may actually call up your carbohydrate addiction. Indeed, many people are trying to eat a low carb or a keto or a carnivore diet. If they use any sweeteners at all, even keto approved sweeteners, they notice that their sweet tooth is starting to come back and they start to crave those foods that they're trying to avoid. And in many cases, this can cause someone to fall off the wagon and then gain back all the weight that they've been trying to lose. Number 3 is something called the cephalic phase insulin response. Almost no one, and most doctors have ever heard of the cephalic phase insulin response, but there's quite a bit of research that this is a real thing and that it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. I'm going to put some research links down in the show notes below so you can check this out and verify it for yourself, or you may even have to take a copy of it to your doctor or to your weight loss guru when they say that that's not true, because it absolutely is. So the cephalic phase insulin response, what is that? So for thousands and thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, when we are about to eat some carbohydrates, our body needs to know that, because we immediately need to start pumping out more insulin to deal with the sugar that invariably comes from all carbohydrates. And so when you put something sweet in your mouth, immediately your insulin goes up. And you may know that insulin is the fat storage hormone or the anti-fat burning hormone. And so when your insulin level's elevated, you ain't gonna burn no fat. And that's a big deal if you're trying to lose fat. So we think that that's why this is happening, but for many people, if they're using lots of keto approved sweeteners, and this applies to all sweeteners, this applies to saccharin, definitely to sugar, aspartame, monk fruit, sucralose, all the sugar alcohols, all the ones that you thought were safe, they probably are better than sugar, no doubt about that. But they still raise your insulin.
제이슨 펑 박사의 영상에서도 언급했지만 인슐린은 비만을 유발하는 가장 중요한 호르몬 중 하나입니다. 우리가 단식을 하거나 저탄수화물 다이어트를 하는 이유 역시 인슐린 수치를 낮추기 위함입니다. 이에 대한 자세한 내용은 오른쪽 상단 관련 영상을 확인해주세요. 인공감미료는 칼로리가 없고 혈당을 높이지도 않지만 인슐린은 높입니다. 식품업계는 우리들이 제로슈거 제품의 칼로리만 바라보기를 원합니다. 하지만 우리는 그것을 먹을 때 유발되는 호르몬 반응에 주목해야 합니다.
Which causes you to, number 1, retain fluid, which shows up on the scale. But more importantly, number 2, they can bring up the carb addictions, but then by far the most important thing of it all is when you taste something sweet, it raises your insulin before you even swallow it. Yeah, there's actually a research study I'll link to below where they let people swish saccharin water in their mouth and sugar water in their mouth for a minute and then spit it out. They checked their insulin, and sure enough, just the taste of it raised their insulin, which is going to turn off your fat burning. It's also very likely that if you smell a cake baking in the oven, or if you see a Danish on the other end of the counter, just those stimuli probably raise your insulin. We don't know about the smelling and the vision, but we absolutely know that if you taste something sweet in your mouth, you just raise your insulin. You just turned off your fat burning for up to 4 hours after you taste that. So this is one reason that I recommend if you're really trying to aggressively burn fat, you got to get all the sweeteners out of your mouth. Now, if you've just started a low-carb diet or a keto diet and you're using artificial sweeteners and you're losing fat and you're feeling better and inflammation is getting better, then keep using that sweetener. But if you stall, then it's time to try a month of no sweeteners at all, and I think that's one of the things that will install you. Keep in mind the artificial sweeteners, the sugar-free sweeteners, the sugar alcohols, all these guys raise your insulin. That's going to slow down, if not turn off, your fat burning.
그렇다면 어떻게 해야 할까요? 대체당은 절대로 먹으면 안 되는 것일까요? 그건 아닙니다. 이 영상을 만들고 있는 저 역시도 설탕 대신 인공감미료를 사용할 때가 많습니다. 캔베리 박사도 다른 영상에서는 제로음료를 더 건강하게 마시는 방법에 대해 이야기하기도 합니다. 하지만 설탕이 들어있지 않으니 얼마든지 먹어도 된다는 건 잘못된 생각입니다. 우리는 대체당에 대해서도 경각심을 가져야 하며 여러분이 정말 건강하고 효과적으로 다이어트를 하기 위해서는 결국 단맛의 중독에서 벗어나야 합니다. 특히 여러분이 제로음료를 마시면서 모든 노력을 다했는데도 살이 빠지지 않는다고 생각한다면 이런 부분을 살펴봐야 할 것입니다. 이상한 다이어트였습니다.